Every language that exists on our planet is like a living organism. It has a date of birth, centuries of development, and then perhaps death. The life process of a language is somehow going by itself. We do not have to interfere or invent anything new, and even if sometimes we do create new words, most of the time we are not conscious of how and why we do it, and we're so used to it. But did you know there are languages that were invented by humans? I mean, someone actually thought of it, decided to create a brand new language, sat down and did it. There are several languages like that existing on the earth, having their numbers of speakers. Esperanto is one of them, about which I'm inviting you today to talk about. If you decide to Google what Esperanto exactly is, one of the first things you'll see is a constructed international auxiliary language. By this complex at first glance term, we will understand an artificial language whose grammar and vocabulary were well planned and thought. The language that plays a role of an additional one, the language in between, so to speak, which helps us, people from all over the world, communicate with no difficulty and therefore make our communication on an international level much easier. In what way easier, you might ask? The thing is that such languages as Edo, Volapük, Interlingua and Esperanto in particular represent in some way a mix of the most widespread languages, usually Indo-European ones. So if you are familiar with 2-3 languages from this group, you'll be able to master Esperanto rather quickly. The interesting fact about Esperanto is that it was planned and created not only for the purpose to make our communication much easier, but also for a peacemaking purpose. We'll talk about it just in a second, but now please let me remind you that such little things as your like to this video and click on the subscribe button help my channel incredibly. That's an amazing sign of your support. If you're willing to help my work a bit more, you can either donate by leaving a little tip or else subscribe to one of my subscription levels and be able to get a monthly extra content by following the link in this video description. And now let's get back to Esperanto. December 15, 1859. Ludovic Leiza, the future creator of Esperanto, is born into a Jewish family in the city of Białystok that was back then a part of the Russian Empire and that is now a part of Poland. Zamenhof's birthplace was very multicultural, despite the fact that the majority of the population in his city and the surroundings were Jews. There were multiple minorities of Russians, Poles, Germans and others. Some kind of a melting pot. Living in such a multinational atmosphere, which unfortunately was filled with disputes and strife, where everybody spoke their own language, Zamenhof began dreaming about creating a language that would unite all the ethnic groups of people. This dream will eventually become his idée fixe, the purpose of his life. It would be quite strange to see a kid with such unusual ideas to be born to a simple family of merchants, right? Even though there might be exceptions. But Ludovic was raised in a family speaking natively 2 languages, Russian and Yiddish. His father, Mark, taught French and German at schools and gymnasiums, so Ludovic learned both of those languages too, and other languages that he learned throughout his life. Zamenhof was brought up in an intellectual atmosphere that of course let him expand his knowledge and broaden his horizons. Even before entering the university, Ludovic already had a plan for his international language. Surprisingly, it was his father who strictly asked him to postpone making his idea public and wait until he finished his university studies. His son obeyed, and in 1879 entered the medicine faculty in Moscow, which he later finished in Warsaw, Poland, due to a very unstable period in Russian history at that time, during which the so-called Narodnaya Volya, People's Will, a revolutionary organization, was founded and made several attempts to kill the Tsar Alexander II that they eventually achieved. His university years were also full of attempts to finish his international language project, which he did. Now the question was where to find the funds to publish it. He began working as a doctor in his medical office, trying to make a profit out of it, and in the meantime the young doctor got married to a girl whose father, even before their marriage, helped him financially to publish his first booklet of the international language in 1887 in Russian called «Международный язык. Предисловие и полный учебник». The book was published under the pseudonym Doktoro Esperanto, which translates from Esperanto Doctor Who Hopes or Doctor Hopeful. And the name is not accidental. It meant his already mentioned hopes of uniting people all over the world with a language that doesn't belong to any ethnicity or culture. The pseudonym was liked by many and stuck. Later, it became the name of the language itself instead of the initial simple international language. In the following 2-3 years, there appeared many translations of the Esperanto Guide to various languages: English, Swedish, Yiddish, Spanish, Czech, and others. Later it became famously known as Unua Libro, first book, which, apart from the complete textbook with Esperanto grammar, vocabulary and texts, with some poems composed by Zamenhof himself, had many pages in which he wrote about the importance of Esperanto, pointed out how many problems language diversity causes, and mentioned all the benefits of having an international and common language among all cultures and nationalities. Following the publication of the first book, the second book of the international language was printed in 1888. Another year later, in 1889, the first issue of the magazine La Esperantisto, Parentist, was published on numerous requests in order to provide reading materials in the language. Did printing materials for Esperanto learning mean its success? Well, yes and no. Firstly, Zamenhof probably set an impossible task to achieve, reaching 10 million Esperanto learners, about which he wrote after making his language public. A number of only 1,000 enthusiasts was reached in around 1889, the majority of them being from the Russian Empire. There was even a book called Names and Addresses of People Who Have Learned the Language, so that the students could keep in touch with each other practicing the language. Interestingly, one of the Esperanto fans was Leo Tolstoy and his followers. The writer himself is said to have learned Esperanto in a matter of some hours and saw many advantages of this language as at that time as in the future. To create such a thing as a new language and try to keep it up when your budgets are rather tight is very difficult. That's what happened to Zamenhof and his family. Up until 1901, Zamenhof and his family struggled a lot with money. The doctor had to put aside all his linguistic pursuits and start making profit working as a doctor, which was not always successful, and unfortunately for him, being dependent again on his father-in-law's financial help. Luckily, during those years, Esperanto wasn't dying out, thanks to Louis de Beaufort, the first promoter of Esperanto who really succeeded. The interest towards Esperanto rised up again, and its inventor, with already solved financial issues, returned to his so-called brainchild. There were a lot of things to do. Firstly, to decide on the language reform. Since the Esperanto first book publication, Zamenhof had been receiving a lot of feedback, tips, advice, criticism regarding the language. Secondly, the first World Esperanto Congress that took place in 1905 in Boulogne-sur-Mer, France. It was an extraordinary event that united people from different nations and different cultures speaking one same language, Esperanto. The speech made by Zamenhof at the Congress seemed outstanding to all the competitors, almost 700 people from about 20 countries. Of course, an amazing success followed almost immediately. The number of Esperanto speakers grew fast. Literary works were translated into Esperanto, among which there is Hamlet, translated into Esperanto by Zamenhof himself back in 1894. Talking about the World Esperanto Congress again, we have to mention that it has been taking place every year since then, except for the years of the world wars and the pandemic years. In 2020 and 2021, the Congress was held on the internet. The Congress has now turned into an annual tradition of meetings among Esperantists that take place every year in different countries. Just after several years, Esperanto and its activists were destined to see the most horrible years of their lives. It's hard to believe that a language once created for people who wanted to show a mutual respect for each other and other cultures, serving as a bridge language for the nations with different languages, was now, I dare say, condemned to death. That was because the ethnicity of Esperanto's creator himself, Zamenhof, as it has been already mentioned today, was born into a Jewish family, which was a no-no in Nazi Germany. Hitler presented Esperanto as a worldwide conspiracy. By 1935, preceding several years of repression, the language was completely banned, and its speakers were being killed. And it wasn't just that. The whole family of Zamenhof, or rather his children, suffered from the Holocaust. His son, Adam, was arrested and then murdered by the Nazis. And two daughters, Zofia and Lydia, were murdered at the extermination camp in Treblinka. It was Lydia who became especially interested in Esperanto and who, after her father's death in 1917, became an active promoter of the language as well as its teacher in different parts of the world. The Nazi Germany wasn't the only place where Esperanto was banned and Esperantists persecuted. Another place like that was the Soviet Union under Stalin's regime, where Esperanto was completely banned in 1937. During the Great Purge, horrific numbers of Esperanto speakers and activists were sent to gulags and murdered. In his book, The Gulag Archipelago, Volume 1, Chapter 2, Solzhenitsyn mentions Stalin and his attitude towards Esperantists. It was forbidden to use Esperanto up until the end of Stalin's regime. The language also suffered in Spain during the Francoist dictatorship. In short, the language has gone through such agony that is hard to imagine. And what makes it even more horrific is the reason for its persecution and ban: its creator's ethnicity. It was something that, as Zamenhof called himself, Doctoro Esperanto was totally against. Inter-ethnic conflicts, religious wars, the language invented specifically for international communication to avoid international conflicts, and look at what happened to it. However, even the Holocaust and its ban couldn't make Esperanto disappear. Nowadays, it is the most spoken, constructed language in the world. The internet, of course, has had a huge impact on its expansion and popularization, so after all, there was a happy ending. While doing a lot of research on Esperanto, I knew I had to talk at least a bit on its linguistic aspects, so to speak. So I decided to take up a Duolingo Esperanto course, just, to see, to feel the language on a basic level. In a nutshell, I found out that Esperanto really is relatively easy to learn, at least at the start. To my surprise, the language does seem to be some sort of a melting pot of different languages. In some words, I saw English and French. In others, I saw German or Russian. So if you speak any, not only the ones that I have just mentioned, but any Indo-European languages, in my opinion, mastering Esperanto won't be a great problem for you. The thing that makes it easy to master Esperanto is, first of all, the word formation. You don't have to memorize hundreds of totally different words, even on a beginner level. Instead, you need to remember a couple of prefixes and suffixes that will help you form the opposites of certain words. What I mean is, for example, in French we have bon and mauvais, or in Russian, хороший, плохой. The two opposite words are not related to each other in any sense, totally different. So you have to memorize each word. Meanwhile, in Esperanto, you'll need to memorize only one bona, and you'll create the word for bad by adding a prefix mal, malbona. The same happens with beautiful and ugly, and any other pair of words. What's more, checking how grammar works and functions in Esperanto was another thing I was really curious about, especially after reading so much about how easy it is. And it turned out to be quite fair. Esperanto is an absolutely regular language, which means there are no irregularities, no exceptions. Like, for example, in English, how many irregular verbs there are to be learned and remembered. It's an absolute nightmare for an English student. Esperanto is a different thing. It has no grammatical genders. 99% of nouns end with or, and it doesn't matter if we mean something masculine or feminine. When it comes to verb conjugation, I think it can't be easier than that. Have a look at the example of how the verb to learn is conjugated in English, Russian and Esperanto. You can see that in the letter the verb endings are the same for each pronoun. This is exactly how all the rest of the verbs in Esperanto will be conjugated in the present tense, past tense and the future tense. All the verbs in the infinitive form, by the way, end with the suffix -e. So if you remember these three suffixes, you basically already know how to conjugate verbs in Esperanto. Coming to the end of today's video, I guess there's no need to say that Esperanto is such a curious topic on the whole. Being a relatively young language, it has already got some heritage and native speakers, by the way. Music has been and is being composed. Novels are written. Various clubs and associations are held in Esperanto in different corners of the world. Even though it hasn't received the title of being officially international language, Esperanto has undoubtedly achieved great success. Thank you for being here till the end. Really hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe and see you as always in the next video.